Hi, this is Eddie Hearn and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, and with me via Zoom, delighted to be joined by some of the usual faces, Asif Khan and Montell Dewante Lowe, and this is the Lights Out Boxing Podcast, podcast 27 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. Lads, how's it going?
Yeah, it's good, man. It's good.
Yeah.
What a name, man. Montell Dewante Lowe.
No, man. I should have been a boxer.
Oh, what a name, man. Is that your actual real name?
Yeah. Full name.
Oh, cool name, man. Yeah, all good, man. All good.
Yeah, good, man. Just staying healthy, man. That's all we can do.
Yeah, it's been a while since you two have jumped on the podcast. I mean, I know Liverpool and Chelsea haven't exactly been a brilliant team to watch as of late, but good to have you boys back. Before we get started, happy anniversary. It's been 3 years since we formed Lights Out many years ago. It's been a brilliant 3 years, great 3 years for the channel. I'm glad that we're still going stronger than ever. And it's our 27th podcast. And obviously just want to remind the viewers out, if they haven't, to hit the subscribe button. Make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. And of course, check out you guys as well on the social media platforms. We'll be sharing the links in the description. Let's get started. We'll talk about last Saturday night's first UK show of the year. Very good show, but very surprising ending. Josh Warrington's O has gone, defeated by Mauricio Lara in the main event. Quite frankly, looking back at the show, I've said for many weeks, ring inactivity will always play a massive part in your career. 16 months out, a fight everyone expected Warrington to win. Everyone expected him to go on and rule the division, and everyone had him down as the #1 featherweight in the world. Lads, what went wrong on Saturday night at the Wembley Arena for the Leeds Warrior?
Everything. Do you know what? It's funny, yeah. When I start watching the fight, and I had to remind myself who's got a better knockout ratio, because Warrington come out swinging, and I thought, hang on, man, this guy. I mean, Warrington's got 6 or 7 knockouts. The other one's he had 15 knockouts out of 25 fights. But Warrington come out swinging, and I thought, this ain't gonna end well, man. And then he caught Lara a few times, but no effect. But then I think in the first round, Lara connected a right hook, and you can see straight away this guy's got power. And it just, inactivity, you can use all the all the excuses you want. But the game plan for me was just like, I don't know what he was trying to prove, but he obviously didn't prove the point he was trying to.
Yeah, I'd agree with Asif there, because I was shocked at how he started the fight, knowing that Warrington's a pressure fighter who obviously relies on the volume of punches that he makes. I was shocked that he kind of came out swinging with a puncher. And I think it was a lot of things like complacency definitely kind of crept in. Whether he meant for it to creep in or not, it was evidently there. And I think as well, he underestimated his power. I thought he went in there and thought, I can take his punches. And I think after the first round, I kind of sensed it. I thought, he's gone with the wrong game plan here. But I think, like, if you look up leading to the fight as well, how he vacated the belt. Obviously, he didn't want that rematch with Galahad. It doesn't look good now that he's lost, because you're thinking, why didn't he fight Galahad in a rematch to keep the belt? It's a prestigious belt. And now it's going to look like he didn't want to fight Galahad because he probably didn't think he could beat him. But yeah.
I think his reasoning for fighting Galahad was because he went from beating Lee Selby to Carl Frampton. Then he's seen it as a sort of like a downgrade to fighting Kid Galahad. So, and of course, if you look at the reason why he left Frank Warren, is because that was one of the only options they could do at the time. There was a lot of talk of him fighting Shakur Stevenson, but I think Shakur Stevenson, who is looked after by Andre Ward, they weren't interested in a fight with Josh Warrington because, one, the revenue of it was not good, and two, I believe that they didn't want to come over to the UK to fight Josh Warrington. So I don't think the Kid Galahad fight, in terms of money wise, was big enough for Josh Warrington. But I think looking at it overall, I think he should have taken the Galahad fight, because a lot of people to this day believe Galahad beat him. And I thought it was a very close decision. I've watched it back twice, that fight, and I thought it was a draw overall. And I don't think Warrington did enough to win the fight that night. So you can understand why he did not want to take the Galahad fight, being out 16 months in the ring. You know, he was talking about unifying the division, but I found it a bit strange that he's talking about how it's important to unify. Then he goes and vacates the belt, you know, the belt that he worked so long for. You know, he left Eddie Hearn once just to get as close as possible to a world title shot. And Frank Warren got him to the world title. You know, they sold out the Ellen Road to when he beat Lee Selby, which was the biggest and best night of his career. And then the highs carried on beating Carl Frampton. So I just didn't, I don't know, a lot of it didn't make sense, you know.
Sorry, Faisal. Quick question. Sorry to cut you. But he wanted this fight. He's supposed to have the fight with Kanju.
Yeah.
But does Kanju have a proper belt, or does he have a regular belt?
I think it's a regular belt. I don't think it's a proper belt. But again, that fight, you know, I mean, it's strange how for many months they were talking about Shakur Stevenson, Gary Russell Jr. Then out of nowhere, Kanju come into the frame. So I think he's been mismanaged a bit as well. Like, and I didn't really see the need to put him in a show where he's headlining it, where it puts more pressure on him, where he's not fought for 16 months. I think the best thing for him would have been to have perhaps fought under Dillian White Povetkin, one undercard, where there's less pressure on him. He goes in there, gets rounds under his belt, gets a win, and then he sort of moves on to those big fights. So the setback back for him now is going to be massive because of obviously the pandemic and everything. He has to fight Lara again. He has to beat Lara again. And I don't think any of the world champions in that weight division will want to entertain a fight with him because his O's gone and because of how the current situation is with the pandemic. Asif, do you think, like, when you look at it, the Lara rematch is the only best option for him out there now?
I think Eddie Hearn's already said he's going to make it. And he has to. It's interesting how he used to talk, but for me, he done an AJ, man. He overlooked this guy. You know, even when you watch press conferences and that, he was talking about the Russells and the Stevensons, and he completely overlooked this guy, 100%. He went in there and thought, I'm going to blast this guy. He's a no one. Who's he got on his record? He's got a couple of losses. I'm going to blast him out, and I'm going to go on to bigger and better things. That didn't happen. So yeah, he has to go. He has to go and right the wrong. And I think in the rematch, I think, you know, he'll do what he does best. He is a pressure fighter, but he's a pressure fighter where he doesn't throw these bombs, man. He was swinging for the fences, and, you know, he paid the price.
Current world champions in that featherweight division are Gary Russell Jr., Leo Santa Cruz, and Navarrete. Navarrete is a very, very good fighter. He's one ferocious puncher, and he's managed by Top Rank and Bob Arum. And I believe also there was a lot of talks about that fight happening. But judging on that last performance by Warrington, he wouldn't last 5 minutes with Navarrete. That's no disrespect, but there's levels in that division right now. And I believe Josh Warrington is beyond fighting at that level. And even if you look at the other names in that division, you know, you mentioned the Kanju fight, Gary Russell Jr., regardless of his age, these are still world-class operators. Now, I pretty much believe that the rematch is his best option, but I also think a fight with Kid Galahad as well, because this Lara guy can actually fight. He's such a dangerous puncher as well, and he hurt Warrington on more than one occasion, and the fight itself should have been stopped after the first round.
100%, man.
The
fourth round, I can't believe that they let that fight carry on. Not even just the fourth round, but the beginning of the fifth, he didn't have his legs.
He didn't.
He was all over the place. And that's where, you know, the corner needs to take responsibility, because from round 5 to when the fight got stopped, he got punished, man. And it was, I think, I don't know who said it at the end. It was maybe
Johnny Nelson said it. Yeah,
it was uncomfortable to watch. Adam Booth as well. So it was really uncomfortable because he took a beating. You know, he did at times come back and I don't say he hurt Lara, but yeah, it was very uncomfortable to watch.
It's not the Josh Warrington I know, because I look back at the previous fights with Carl Frampton, Lee Selby. The guy is a machine, but again, I say it enough times. Ring inactivity is the most important thing in boxing. Like, if you're 16 months out and you're expecting to come back in the ring, no matter who it's against, and looking to blow your opponent away, especially without fighting, forget any fans, but the Leeds fans, how much they spur Warrington on. You only have to look back at that night in Ellen Road when he beat Lee Selby and become world champion. And then he goes further down the road to Manchester and he beats Carl Frampton in the Manchester arena. He's a fighter that relies on the crowd. And again, just, it was tough to watch. And I actually like Josh Warrington, because a lot of people don't rate him. But I looked at those 2 fights against Selby and Frampton, and there is something there. The guy is a good fighter and he's got an engine on him. But again, 16 months out of the ring, and it paid up with him. Let's move on, because there's another show on Saturday night. A guy that you rate quite highly, Montell, a guy that we spoke a lot about, is Pretty Boy Josh Kelly, who takes on David Avanesyan for the European welterweight title. This fight has been rescheduled so many times, but it's actually going to happen now. We understand that they've both passed their COVID tests. Montell, what's the hype around Josh Kelly for you?
Well, I think, like, when I look at Josh Kelly, I think I see a boxer with so much skill. Obviously, he's got a good amateur background, being in the GB squad. But I think when he first made his debut, and like he was very like elusive, very unorthodox with his attacks, and kind of like how he comes out of the way of punches and whatnot. I think that's what you want to see in a young boxer. A lot of English fighters aren't like him, so that style, that kind of like, which kind of mirrors Prince Naseem in some ways, you don't see anymore. You see a lot of basic fighters with a normal jab, but he's kind of like different, and he goes against the grain. So I think that excitement comes from his style. But I think the one thing I would say is that the journey that he's had so far in his career, I think they've rushed him a bit too much. Because I think I looked at it today and I thought he's fighting Avanesyan in his 10th or 11th fight, and I think for someone who's 26 who has had a long amateur career, but he's still young in his pro game, and I still think those learning fights, and he has had them, but I still think he should have maybe had a few more before this fight. But looking at Avanesyan as well, he was a tough, credible opponent in the welterweight division. Obviously, he's beaten Peterson. No, I think he lost to Peterson.
He beat
He
Shane
lost to
Mosley.
Mean Machine. Yeah,
beat Shane Mosley.
Beat Shane Mosley. I think he lost to Mean Machine as well. But he's been in there with some tough opponents, and I think it's the fight where he's got to come of age now. He's got to say, okay, I'm ready to announce myself on the world scene. This is the fight which I'm going to show everyone, showcase my talent, make it all come together. I'm going to show maturity and really kind of make a statement, really. But I think he's got all the tools to do it. And I think this time that he's had off, with the fights being rescheduled, I think he would have learned a lot about himself and been able to mature. And obviously having the right kind of people around him, Adam Booth, Eddie Hearn, it's perfect for him. So I think he's got it this weekend.
They say experience is everything in boxing. Now, I believe this is Josh Kelly's 11th or 12th fight. Now, when you say he needs to step up, he had that opportunity on the Joshua Ruiz 1 undercard when he fought Ray Robinson, and he got a draw. And a lot of people were quite, they criticized him, saying that was his chance to really show people what he's all about. But I do believe the occasion was perhaps a bit too big for him and way too early on in his career. Now, Asif, Montell just mentioned that Avanesyan's fought the likes of Lamont Peterson, the Mean Machine, Mosley. This is Avanesyan, I believe it's his 30th fight. Does experience play a part in this on Saturday night? And if Kelly is to lose, is that the reason why? And is this fight coming a bit too early for Josh Kelly?
Yeah, I think massively experience is going to play a part in this fight. This is the third time they've tried to make this fight happen?
It's the fourth time. I think it's the fourth time.
I think 2019 was a big year for Avanesyan. He got a few wins under his belt. So maybe it's come at the right time for him as well. Maybe the reasons, all these being postponed and that is perfect timing for him. And, I echo what Montell said about, Josh Kelly, man. He's a showman. You don't see fighters like him, man. There's a great comparison, with Prince Naseem, because he's got that movement, the upper body movement, the footwork and everything. You don't see it I don't even think in world boxers, it's very unique what you see, but it's going to be a massive test. And, it's the stage now to announce himself. Like you said, Avanesyan's had some good wins. If Josh Kelly performs well on Saturday, then there's talk of the Conor Benn fight. This fight's got a lot of needle as well. I was watching the interview, press conference between Adam Booth and I don't know the guy's trainer's name. So it's got a bit of a story as well. So it's going to be a good fight, man. But I expect Josh Kelly to go up a gear and really announce himself.
I just want to touch on what Asif just said. He just basically said about the Conor Benn fight. For me in boxing, I've always believed that it's the British route, the European route, and the world elite route. And it's kind of like it kind of makes me think, why has this fight not been with a Conor Benn or a Chris Kongo or with any of the other British welterweights? Because you look at the domestic level of the division, is actually quite exciting right now. And Eddie Hearn said it a few weeks ago in one of his interviews that there's so many fights you can make domestic wise. So it kind of makes me question, why are you not putting him in with the likes of Conor Benn, who's, you know, got a tough test ahead of him in a few weeks as well, with Jesse Vargas. I'm just kind of a bit baffled as to why that Conor Benn fight's not been made, or maybe
I think you kill. Just quickly, Montell, I know you're going to jump in, but I think you kill two birds with one stone with the fights like Conor Benn, because Conor Benn is at that stage now where he will go from domestic to world class. So when they do fight, I don't think you can label that as a domestic buster. You know, they will be ranked. I mean, if they both overcome their next two fights, they'll be ranked quite high, you know, in the boxing world anyway. So it would be classed as like a world, you know, like a world class fight, because they are both great fighters. They do need that fight now to step into that world stage. And I think if they both do overcome their next fights, you know, then the fight between them isn't just a domestic bust-up. It is the next near step to, you know, to world titles.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think, touching back on what Faisal said, I think they were at different paths in their career. So it makes sense if they win both their next fights. But I feel like Kelly was already ahead of Conor Benn, if that makes sense. So when he was fighting Raymond Jones on the Joshua undercard, and obviously he had the Avanesyan fight and stuff, obviously those guys who he was fighting are well ranked within the welterweight governing bodies and their experience, whereas Conor Benn was kind of below that level. And I think his last fight was which propelled him up to Kelly's level. So I think the fight does make sense now. And I think if they both come through their next opponents, then it has to happen, because as Asif said, that propels them onto that kind of world level. I don't know how good they do against kind of like your Sean Porters and your Ugases and those type of fighters, but that's what the next step is after they fight each other.
It's only like natural in boxing, you know, when you look at a British fighter that's, you know, on a good path, started off his career well, you need them both to have that test. For example, rewind back to 2012 when Groves fought De Gale, both undefeated fighters. Get them in the ring together. Let's see who really is ready to make that next step. A few years later, you had White and Joshua do it at the O2 Arena. So for me personally, I would have liked to have seen him clean up at British domestic-wise level first. But obviously, Eddie Hearn's put him in a different route. And yeah, as if you've got a point, maybe if they both win their next two fights, that fight between Kelly and Benn becomes bigger and better. There's also Chris Kongo, who fights in a couple of weeks as well. He's another good fighter. And Eddie Hearn's got a lot of faith in these two fighters. He's even talked about perhaps Conor Benn fighting Amir Khan this year. You know, he's thought about Josh Kelly even fighting Amir Khan. That's how highly he rates them. So, yeah, it's a big year for them, is 2021. And I am looking forward to it as well. Obviously, you got Florian Marku fighting Ryland Charlton as well. You know, there's some big fights on that card, and you got to give credit to Eddie Hearn. Let's just hope there's no dodgy scorings at the end of these fights. But let's move on. The real main topic of this podcast. Now, we talk about the heavyweight division. People say Fury, Joshua Fury, the two champions of the division. But you got to ask the question, who in that division can challenge the two fighters? Now, according to Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn, talks are progressing well, and it's only a matter of time. And there's been a small hiccup in terms of negotiations. We're still waiting for the biggest fight in our generation to be announced. And I'm praying nothing comes in between that fight not happening. And fingers crossed it does happen sooner or later. But you got to look outside those two. So the question I got to ask you two is, who can really challenge Fury and Joshua? Because you got to have a plan B. There is a likely chance that Fury versus Joshua still might not happen. And speaking to someone on the phone today, I'm not going to say any names, but when I spoke to him about this topic, he went ballistic. It's our designer, Umar Farouk. He went in, he goes, I can't believe that the fighters outside that division are not fighting each other right now. You got Jose Parker fighting Junior Farr next, which is a good clash. You got a New Zealand fight, all-type New Zealand fight there. You know, hopefully we're going to get Joe Joyce versus Usyk announced. Derek Chisora might fancy the winner of Joseph Parker Jr. Farr. The questions are still being asked over Deontay Wilder and Andy Ruiz. And of course, Dillian White gets that rematch on March 6th against Alexander Povetkin. But the question is, who can really challenge Fury and Joshua right now? Asif, break it down for us. Who's the number one man outside the top two right now?
No one. Seriously, what they might do is just do a best of 10 or something. Because in my opinion, yeah, the golfing class between them two and then the third and fourth and fifth is so massive. And who is third ranked best heavyweight right now? You'd say maybe Usyk. Well, I see Joshua knocking him out. I see Fury schooling him. I don't see anyone coming close to them two. So if it was up to me, best of 10, let them fight for the next 5 years. Because, all the fighters you mentioned, yeah, the Chisoras and the Parkers and that, they're not going to get, they won't. Can you see any of them beating Fury and Joshua?
But did you ever see Ruiz beating Joshua? The division, I know you're going to say it was a freak, it happened, but the division is, the reason why we did this topic, Asif, here is because if you go back 10 years ago, how rubbish was the division? But then you'd have to go back another 10 years to realize how good the heavyweight division right now, for me, is the best it's been since we had the likes of the Tysons, the Lewises, the Holyfields, the Riddick Bows. That's the reason why we've done this. And I do believe that the names we've mentioned, yeah, they're probably not better than Fury Joshua, but they are big tests. And it's not like the Klitschko era where they were just dominating and beating everybody for fun. These guys are all tests. This is why we've done this topic. So do you honestly believe, Asif, none of these guys can challenge Fury and Joshua right now?
No, honestly, none. I don't see any of them testing them two. I don't. That's my honest answer. I don't. You know what? I really wanted Dillian Whyte to be that person that would, break them two up, put his name in the hat. But then he lost against Povetkin. So, he's tied up there now. Therefore, he's going to fight Povetkin again, and who knows what happens. If he loses that's it, game over for him. He's got to take full steps back. And then who's next? People say Daniel Dubois. Who knows if he's ever going to be the same? Usyk, is he a real heavyweight? Joyce. I don't see anyone close to these two, man. Nothing excites me in the heavyweight division other than them two fighting. If anyone else is fighting, I ain't paying £19 for it.
You know what, Asif, yeah? I think I do understand where you're coming from, but we've got to be realistic in it. Like, you can't underestimate these other fighters because Dillian Whyte can still give anyone a run for their money. Deontay Wilder is always dangerous. He's always dangerous.
He's dangerous to himself, man.
No. But listen, yeah. If you put him in against Joshua, yeah, there's always that chance, yeah, that he lays Joshua out. There's always that chance because styles make fights. We know this. So you can't just say that no one else can challenge them because they both can get beat. Like, they both can get beat. But my personal opinion is, I think Usyk, I still think Usyk. Like, I know everyone says about the size and whatnot, but he's fought at heavyweight before, all beating amateurs. He toyed with Joe Joyce in the World Boxing Super Series, and he's going to do it again when the fight later on this year. And when he does that, then he's going to have a title shot. And then you're going to see how much the bigger guys will struggle to pin him down. Because, yeah, he may not be able to he may not have the punch resistance because he hasn't got the size, but try and catch him. Try and lay a combination on him. We've seen Chisora try and do it. And that wasn't even Usyk at his best. That was Usyk at, I think 70%.
Nah,
when you see a top
Montell,
Usyk, no,
he struggled, bro. He struggled massively.
I've said it. I've laid it out here now. He's going to give problems. He may not win the belt, but he's going to give problems to those bigger guys.
He's more likely to give problems to Fury than Joshua. Joshua, I think, straight through. I think Fury and Usyk turns into a chess match, but Joshua walks straight through him. I don't think he's got the power. I know you say about ring IQ and all that. He's the amateur pedigree and that. But when these big 18 stone, 19, I would put it like this: when Joshua fights Usyk, you won't see a lean Joshua coming. You'll see a Joshua that will pile on the pounds, and he'll just sit on him.
He hasn't got the footwork. He hasn't got the footwork to. I know you'd expect him to kind of just walk him down and, lay on him and that, but it doesn't work like that. We've seen that happen before, innit? And I think Usyk, the IQ is too much, man. The footwork, the speed is too much. And I think someone like Joshua would definitely struggle. he'll struggle against more than Fury.
Montell
Definitely.
said about how Wilder's always got a punching chance. I agree with him on that. But what's everyone's thoughts on his latest, fiasco with former trainer Mark Breland? Because I actually like Deontay Wilder. I really like Deontay Wilder because of that one chance he's always got. He's kind of like, for me, he's the Divock Origi of the heavyweight division. You can always come up with something good, right? But listen, I never had enough time to make a comparison. Asif, Deontay Wilder, has he completely lost the plot with his comments over Mark Breland?
Listen, man, the guy, I feel for him, man, because you got to imagine, he was...
Divock Origi.
He was cloud nine, right? He was the unbeaten one. He was the one that was holding the key to the unification belts. He was the wanted man. And then he's now become the forgotten man. He's the excuse man. It's everyone else's fault but my fault, man. And I do feel for him, but I don't ever seen him, being back in a title fight unless someone vacates a title or two. But his talk of him fighting Andy Ruiz Jr., that's the level I think we'll see him at now.
That's actually that's the perfect fight for them both right now, because they are both former world champions. They held all the belts at one point in this division. That for me is a perfect fight for them both right now, because you'll know which fighter is capable of becoming a world champion again. People say about Andy Ruiz being an overnight success. You have to give him another chance though to see if there actually really is a good fighter behind Andy Ruiz. So I do think
he did get another chance, and Joshua played with him.
Yeah, but it's a case of like he kind of settled for that one night in New York. It's like, then you have to question his hunger. Is he hungry to do it again? Was he just?
He looks hungry, man. He looks hungry.
But was he disciplined though? Was he disciplined enough to say, you know what, I'm going to live the life of a true world boxing champion? And I don't think he was. But I think you can't. There's always going to be a draw with Wilder because there's always entertaining fights with him in it. And like, even if, let's say, Joshua beats Fury or whatever, like, which he won't, but let's say he beats him and Wilder's there waiting, Wilder comes off a victory, that's still a massive fight.
Yeah, but before huge fight. The risk reward was massive to fight Wilder because he had something there that people wanted. And that was the title. Now, the risk reward is, what is the point of fighting him? He hasn't got a massive fan base in America, if we believe Tyson Fury. He hasn't got a belt. So what is the reward to fight him now? That's what I think now. I don't think there's any need for Joshua or Fury to go and fight him. Maybe a Dillian White, maybe a Andy Ruiz, but I don't see that.
But then what route would you say that Joshua and Fury take next after their fights, their respective
Best
fights?
of 10. Best of 10.
Because let's say right, they have the fight in the summer, then have a rematch. Then let's say Tyson Fury wins 2 of the fights. Then what does he do next? Because I could see him retiring, but
I could see him retiring.
100% agree with you.
What's the next thing that they do?
There's no way he'll fight anyone in that division because Tyson Fury, as much as is my favorite heavyweight, my favorite fighter, he does not need to fight anyone else in that division. But his story to come back into the sport was one thing, but to come back into sport after everything and beat the 2 best fighters in that division at the time, which were Wilder and Joshua, he just forget about a second or third fight. He beat Joshua and that's it, done with boxing.
And then that's when it opens the division back up because then the titles will all get vacant. And then we might see them big fights.
Before we bring the podcast to an end, you have to give me an answer, guys. Who does challenge Joshua and Fury right now? I'm going to say the winner of Joyce versus Usyk. Asif, come on, I know you said nobody best out of 10, but you got to be a bit fair to the podcast and the viewers. So who can, all right, maybe not challenge him, but who gets you off your seat and who makes you think, yep, I'll order that for £20. But let's not go into the whole financial thing of it because you two guys.
I think the one that probably raises the most questions for me is Usyk. Because like Montell said, he's unpredictable. You don't know what he's going to bring, He's got that background, he's got that pedigree. So probably Usyk. Anyone else, I don't see, honestly, I don't see them touching them too. So yeah, Usyk. If I had to choose one, which you're making me, I'd say Usyk.
Montell, before we quickly bring it to an end.
Yeah, I'm a big Usyk fan, but I think he poses a lot of problems and questions to those two. So I'm going to go with Usyk. Obviously, I'd say after that, probably Dillian White because, he's always going to bring a fair game. So, yeah.
Well, we'll know where Dillian White's mental state is when it comes to March the 6th, and I do hope he pulls it off, and I do think he will pull it off. I'm backing Dillian White's stock, Povetkin within the first 5 rounds, but only time will tell. Asif, Montell, massive shout out to you boys for both jumping on the podcast. And to the viewers out there, let us know what you think in the comment section, and make sure you give these guys a follow on social media. Make sure you check out our social media platforms as well. The links are in the description. Boys, a pleasure as always. And thank you to the viewers for watching podcast 27 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. Lads, take care. Look after yourself throughout these unprecedented times. We look forward to speaking to you in podcast number 28.